This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze. And for those of you who listen to Avoid the Maze, or if you are a new listener, know it's about your journey through life. And we all are on a journey. And no matter what you planned when you were 5 years old, when you wanted to be a fireman, a doctor, a nurse, or a mom, you know what? That may have changed by now. And that's okay, because we are all on various paths. But how do we navigate those? And one of the things that we do on this show is we invite guests to share their journey so we can compare notes. It's not that we're going to go on their exact journey, walking in their footsteps, but they might give us some idea how to avoid the maze. So today I have Bobbi Kaler with us. And thank goodness for podmatch.com, because they have introduced me to some of the most vibrant guests that we've had on, and the journeys are just incredible. But there's always something that rings a bell and says, hey, I've been down that path as well. So Bobbi, welcome to New Cleveland Radio, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. First of all, a little bit about myself. Well, at this point, I've been coaching for more than 20 years. I'm kind of in the self-leadership vein of coaching. And what we really do, my husband and I, we have a business together, and we help people really design their life strategy for achieving what they want. And at this point, we tend to work with a lot of sales leaders and sales professionals, because these are people who work very, very hard. And one day you wake up and you think, is this all there is? Am I just my job? You know, and even if you're not in sales, I think we can all relate to that.
Right.
You know,
exactly.
That feeling.
So when you say that, am I just my job? A lot of us go through periods of time when that is the case. You know, we have to put food on the table. We have to pay our rent, our mortgage, whatever. And what we think we want to do, we're not sure will cover that. So what do you tell somebody that says, hey, Bobbi, you know, I have to go work this customer service job, making minimum wage, and that puts food on my table. When do I have time to do something else that really is going to make me feel good?
Yeah. And that is a reality. And just, you know, like I've been there for many years. I was the sole breadwinner or main breadwinner in our family. And it was about 3 years ago, I found myself, because I traveled a lot, you know, and what I was doing at the time, and I've done this for many years as well, is working with the, you know, sales teams to help them become better at sales or become better leaders. And I loved that. Right. And it was 3 years ago. I was in San Francisco for a client. And I remember I was at the hotel and I thought, I'm so tired of being on the road. I'm so tired of being one dimensional in my life. And that's what it feels like, right? It feels like you're one dimensional. And I was thinking, you know, there's all these other parts of me, right? I'm also a wife. I'm a mom to my dog and my cat. And I'm a daughter to an aging father, and I'm a sister. I'm an aunt. And it was hard, because at the time it wasn't an option to just say, well, I'm done. I'm going to go and do something else. So I get that pain. What I would say though, Karen, is to start thinking about what are all the roles that are important to me? Who do I want to be in all those roles? And this is something that when you were saying, you know, if you have a customer service job or whatever job you have, it begins with carving out a little bit of margin so that we have that space to think and reflect, and maybe even, you know, jot some notes down in a journal, whatever that might be for a person. But we need that time, because it's interesting. Once we start doing that and we get intentional with who do I want to be and all the roles that are important to me, that's when then we can start looking at, well, how can I bring more of myself to those roles? So for example, I was working with someone, she's amazing. And she's a vice president and didn't want to give up her job because she liked that job, but it wasn't all that she wanted to be. And something that was missing for her was working with youth and grief counseling. Well, that doesn't mean, because that was just a passion of hers. it doesn't mean that we have to leave what we're doing necessarily. Sometimes we do, right? But it doesn't mean we have to leave what we're doing. In her case, it was, how can I add that in? How can I carve out an hour a week at her local church and work with youth? And it brought her so much meaning and therefore happiness in all areas of her life. Does that kind of make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Because those are some of the things that I had to learn to do as well. Even though we say, I don't have time, I'm already putting in 60 hours a week. I have a husband. I had children. You know, it was like, I wasn't doing the self-care, but I was finding that part of my self-care really was finding that niche of time to devote to something that made me smile.
Yeah. And I think that's huge. What makes us feel good? And you're right. I mean, I think when any of us think about taking on something new, it's like, where am I going to find the time for that? You know, because we're all so busy. But when we do the work and we get intentional with what would make me come alive, what would make me smile, to use your words, that's when we're like, okay, I can find the time. It's amazing how the time appears once the intention appears.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, you know, over the last 2 years with the pandemic, we know that people are now really starting to search for who they are. Yeah. Their identity, for many of us, has changed in the last 2 years. 2 years ago, it's interesting, right before the pandemic started, I started getting calls to do on-board trainings with corporations and talking about positivity and bringing it into their businesses. I was so excited. It was like, you know, my youngest, you know, he's grown up, he's working. My husband is supposed to be retired, but he really isn't. I can do this. I can find time. And then next thing I know, I had to go in for knee surgery, and I was told 6 to 8 weeks of recovery. I talked to all these people and they said, no problem. Once you're recovered, we'll get you back on the road. Well, I had my surgery the week before everything shut down.
No.
So I will tell you, after I, you know, was healed, I sat in my house, even though I was still doing my podcast. And I thought, you know, my dream has come to an end, until I realized, wait a second, there's another way to have that dream. But at first, it hit like a gut. It hit me in the gut. So I'm sure you've talked to clients over the past 2 years. How are your clients getting through this time?
It can be hard. You know, and your story kind of illustrates it in terms of we can think, oh man, we just lost our dream. You know, I mean, when the pandemic hit, I was on the road all the time. I had to relearn everything I did. Right. It all became virtual. I started a podcast in there too, because it's like, hey, that's another way to try to help. So I think that kind of what you did is reframing. It doesn't mean that my dream has ended. It means my dream might look a little different.
Absolutely.
I think that's one of the big things. And the second thing I'd say, as far as how clients get through it or how we can get through it, is to recognize, and this is just, if I have a superpower, this might be it, is that even if it looks like we're facing a brick wall, and sometimes it does, COVID looks like that, right? The pandemic looks like that. Even when it looks like we're facing a brick wall, to really have that belief that there's still a way around it, through it, over it. And our job is just to figure out, where is one loose brick? Because if I can find one loose brick, I can bring that wall down, or I can find my way through it. My husband always laughs at me. He's like, he goes, you're kind of like a MacGyver when it comes to the brick wall. But it's true. I've faced so many brick walls in my life, but that also leads me, because of the brick walls I faced in my life, that leads me to 3 fundamental truths that I have. And number 1, it's that the future can be changed. No matter where we are right now, we are not stuck by our present circumstance. I'm not saying it's easy, but the future can be changed. The second one is that we can change our future. And, you know, we can be our own superhero. We don't have to wait. Someone else can't do that for us. We can do it. So really own that power that we have. And then the third thing is that we don't have to wait. And I think this is one of the things that keeps so many of us stuck, by that brick wall or by whatever we're facing right now. We don't have to wait. We don't have to have the whole plan. We don't have to have the whole vision. We don't need to know everything that we might need to know, because we can't. I have a philosophy that we can learn our way forward, because, and this comes from, I've coached more than 3,000 people, and that's a promise I can make. You can learn what you need to learn along the way. And a lot of times we don't even know what we need to learn until we get started.
Absolutely.
So, you know what I mean?
Well, and I look back at when I was in corporate America, I was working those 60 hours a week because I put those expectations on myself. Yeah. My company did not. In fact, they told me at 40 hours, what are you still doing here? And I kept saying, wow, but this person needs me and this has to be done. And it was like, but you're the only one who's doing that. Everybody else around you is smart. They're leaving after 40 hours. But because I loved my job, didn't love my circumstances. Because I loved my job, I kept saying to myself, this is okay, this is okay. When I now look back, and I've been working with coaches like yourself, I understand something now, which I wish I had understood then, that instead of working 60 hours there, I could have worked my 40 hours, still been competent in my job. And if I wanted to, I could have taken those extra 20 hours to do what I love to do.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm hoping our listeners are going to hear, because I think sometimes we bully ourselves into not moving forward.
Yep. You're absolutely right. And how much happier would you have been had you taken those 20 hours or even 10 of those 20 hours?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You make a great point though, Karen, too, when you said we bully ourselves, right? Because we all have these internal saboteurs, and this is proven in neuroscience, right? We have internal saboteurs and they're always talking to us. Someone described them, and I think this is a great analogy, like a crazy sportscaster that just can't stop talking, right? And it doesn't even matter if it's the truth, and often it's not the truth. But I've worked with so many managers who are in what you're describing there. I can't stop, I can't walk away, people need me. And it's like, the truth of the matter is you can, but we have these saboteurs that they keep us trapped. And we have to start recognizing when they're talking to us, and then to challenge it and to make a different decision with our thoughts.
Well, what I find interesting, and I just started doing this in the last couple of weeks, I was getting all that chatter all the whole month of December, knowing that, I had this vision of ramping up Avoid the Maze, doing 3 to 4 interviews a day, and just, because I was enjoying it. But then I realized, because of the holidays, a lot of my guests really weren't available. And I found myself in this downtime. And when the downtime came, this chatter went through my head. You're not good enough. They don't want to be on your program. You're going to, back and forth. And I happened to wear hearing aids, and just hearing all this sound, sitting at my desk, that one day I actually took my hearing aids out. And really? I know those voices were still there, but I stopped hearing them, because symbolically I said to myself, I'm not going to listen. And I thought, wow, they're not real voices, it's myself. So those voices were going on. But if I can symbolically turn off the voices and say, you know what, I've got this downtime, it's okay. I'll binge watch Netflix. I will clean my house. I will go for a walk, do whatever. But instead, in the beginning, I was letting them say to me, you got to keep working. Look what's happening to you. And then I did a podcast with one of our podcasters who has just started a new job. And so she's trying to balance The new job is pulling her, but she wants her podcast to keep going. And I said to her, I know you don't wear hearing aids, but what I want you to do at the end of your day shift, whether it's 8 hours, 9 hours, I want you to symbolically take them out of your ears and do what is good for you. And she said to me, oh, that's not going to happen. And I said, but it has to happen, because if it doesn't, you're going to end up like me. And where I was, I mean, I started seeing myself getting depressed in December. And December could be a depressing month for all of us during the holiday season, but it wasn't that. I was pushing myself. But once I stopped, everything started falling into place.
Yep. That's the magic of it. And so to somehow, I love the symbolism, you know, the symbolic nature of what you did. You can also name the saboteur. Like for me, one of my saboteurs is I tend to have a lot of vigilance. It's not surprising when you think about my upbringing. My mom was a functional schizophrenic. So that's how I survived, was always being aware of where's the danger, how can I avoid the danger? And that was great for survival when I was a kid. Not really necessary now, but it carries with it. So I've named my my vigilant saboteur Virgil, because for some reason it kind of takes away some of the power, because you know it's kind of a fun name. And so when I hear that, it's like, oh, Virgil's talking to me again. And it's huge when you do that. It just kind of like, it reminds you like, yeah, that's not really reality. It's a worry, it's a concern. And here's the thing, all of us have those voices like you described. Every single person on the face of this planet, we have those voices. And when we normalize it, I think it helps to turn the volume down a little bit. But something, if it's taking out your hearing aid, if it's, you know, whatever that is for a person, but to turn that down or off is huge, because otherwise it keeps us trapped and feeling bad.
So why is it there are people in our society that think when we talk about these voices, okay, that we're the crazy ones, that we need the medication, we need the guys that, you know, to put us in a straitjacket. And I heard this my whole life, okay, that, you know, if you're hearing chatter, there's something wrong with you. And I've heard it my whole life. And, you know, it's only in the last couple of years that there are coaches like yourself who are coming out and normalizing it and saying, yes, it's all the things that we've heard and learned throughout the years, and what we've determined is the most important.
Yeah. Here's the thing. There's a difference. Like, you know, if you are clinically ill, like, you know, like my mom was, right? I mean, she had paranoia to the extent if a plane flew over our house, she thought they were spying on her. And it's like, oh my God, that's not true. That's when that's a different situation. But when we're talking about self-talk, the voice, you know, and it's that, and usually it's our voice telling us, oh, you're not good enough, or, oh, your guests they just don't want to be on your show. That's very, very different. And I think part of the reason it's becoming more normal now is because neuroscientists have turned their attention to it. So there's science backing this up. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's become more normal, if you will. And I also think it's why people are starting to talk more about it now too. You know,
absolutely.
Even like top athletes, you know, I saw something it was a quarterback, and he was saying, you know, and I can't remember who it was right now, but he's like, you know what, in a big game, he goes, I have to silence that voice. You know, everyone does. So it's just become, and I'm glad that it has, because otherwise people think oh, it's just me, something's wrong with me. No, it means you're human.
Well, and it gives us that credibility that we can actually talk to somebody about it, that we can share that, you know, right now I'm feeling doubtful. Yeah. And the reason I'm feeling doubtful is I'm remembering all these things, and I'm, you know, I'm trying to process it. I remember growing up, I have 2 older brothers. It wasn't that my parents didn't see my value, they did, but they saw my brother's values more than mine. Okay.
Oh,
They were going to be the men of the house. They were going to be the breadwinners. Eventually I was going to marry somebody and sort of be taken care of. And it wasn't until I probably hit in my 50s that my brothers started seeing me as their equal. Okay.
Wow.
And my mother started seeing me as, yeah, you do have value. And because I had gone 50 years of my life assuming I didn't have the same value, if something was offered to me, I questioned myself. Can I really do that? Am I good enough? I don't have the training in it, even though I may understand it, and back and forth. And now I look at things differently. So, such as when I was asked to do these speaking engagements, I didn't even give it a second thought. It was, I can do it.
Yep.
Disappointed that it didn't happen. In many ways, yes. In many ways, you know what? You're right. I'm doing a new path, and that's okay.
Right. That's right.
So, how do clients find you? I mean, a lot of us prior to the last couple of years didn't really understand what coaching and support was.
Yeah. So I think a lot of it, how people have found me is I'm very active on LinkedIn and I post a lot because I truly want people to know that whatever your circumstances might be, you can change them. And so I post on LinkedIn simply to add value because I want people to know this. That's important to me. So I think a lot of my clients find me that way. A lot of clients find me because of the podcast that I do. I guest a lot. I also have my own podcast. And then because of the work I've done in corporate with teams and sales leaders, sales managers, and sales professionals for so many years, a lot of them are in my network. And that's a world I understand, so that's how most of them find me.
And networking can happen on any level.
Oh, yes.
So when people tell me, well, I don't have a network. Well, my comment is, do you have at least one friend? Okay. Doesn't have to be your BFF, just one friend. And do you have one person who you talk to semi-regularly, whether that's talking on the phone, being in a Zoom call, texting, whatever your type of communication is? You got to start with one.
That's right.
From one, you can go out. We noticed that when we started podcasting, we had this sort of small network. And it was like, okay, so we have 5 people listening to us today. And next month we had 10 people listening to us. And I decided not to get hooked up on who's listening.
That's right.
Because all it takes is one person to make a change. So when people are out there searching for it, and it is deep inside, how do you get them started?
Yeah, it begins with really tapping and fair, disclosure here. It does take work sometimes. Sometimes it can be very easy, but a lot of times it takes work. And it begins with really taking the time to reflect on, who do I know myself to be at my deepest level, right? What are my values? What's important to me? And then to also think about the different roles that you want to have, mother, daughter, whatever it might be, boss, whatever, but all those different roles in our lives that are important to us. And then to come up with a positive aspirational statement that captures who we want to be in that role. Now, it should not be a should. And it can't be from someone else. It can't be like, well, so-and-so thinks that I should do this. No. It needs to be from deep. It needs to be from our heart, right? What's important to us? Like, for example, part of mine is I'm an athlete and I care for myself. I nourish my body with nutritious food so that I work out so I can always be fit, strong, and healthy. Because my vision for myself in that regard, I'm going to be 56 in a couple of weeks. And my vision for myself is I want to be one of these people that I see out, they're in their 80s and 90s, and they're still cross-country skiing and they're still road cycling. And those are two of my passions. And whenever I see people out there, I'm like, that's what I want to be. And that starts now. I can't wait until I'm 90 and then say, oh, I want to go skiing.
Right. Exactly.
Probably not going to happen that way. So, but that's part of it, right? I'm a strong, fit, healthy athlete. That's part of it's what Richard Boyatzis at Case Western calls your ideal self. And so, but to think about those different roles and what's our ideal self, how do we show up in those roles? That's where it typically starts, is really honing in on that. And sometimes that takes work, and that's okay that it does.
And I think that's where some people get scared. They don't like the word work. So I know when, I went back to school to complete my degree. My son was graduating high school, and it just came to me like, I've worked all these years with just an associate's degree, but my son is graduating high school. He's going on for a 4-year degree. Gosh, can he be better than mom? And it was sort of a competition thing. But, it was like, I wanted to prove that if I'm going to encourage him to do this, why didn't I finish? And I did go back and finish. And I realized that how I went to school 40 years before that was totally different. I wasn't ready at 18. Okay. I wanted that social life. I wanted to find Mr. Right. I wanted things to come easy, and it didn't come easy. It was a struggle.
Yeah.
So when I decided to go back to school, working full time, being a parent of a new college student, having a husband who was trying to change his career at the same time, it couldn't have been a harder time. And I thought, if it's going to be tough, now I want to do it, because everything else around me is tough. And I thought if everything around me was easy, I probably wouldn't have gotten through it. Now that's me. Yeah. That doesn't mean that's the other person.
Right.
But as you said, if I had said, this is what I want to do, I want to have my degree and do something with it, but I got to wait and keep waiting, I'd be the most unhappy person.
That's right.
And the same for you. If you want to be doing all these things at 80 and 90 years old, if you're not prepared now, how are you going to be able to do it? Now, you might, but most of us probably wouldn't be.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right around the whole thing around it takes work and it's tough. Sometimes it's easy to think about it in terms of it's an exploration and it may take time. Right. Which is, I think we want things so fast in our society, and some things take some time to percolate, and that's okay.
Well, we're used to things being fast now. Okay. Yeah. If we're waiting for a phone call, okay, we're walking around with the phone in our hand, and we keep looking at it.
Why isn't it ringing?
And yet, I was brought up, the first phone we had in our house was one phone, had a party line on it. My mother never sat around waiting for a phone call. If the phone rang, she answered it, But today, that's what we're doing. And if it's not a phone call, where's that text message? Where's that email? Where's something to tell me that I can move on? And I know I'm working very hard on getting better about that, not being so tuned into, I'm waiting for an answer. And that I have to respond right away either.
That's right. There's very few things that need that immediate response. Very few.
You are right. So you talked about the things, how you envision yourself. Okay. So is this something that every day you have to carve time out for, so that when you're 80, when you're 90, you're in the best shape?
It's more, well, when you say carve out, do you mean the reflection on who I want to be?
Well, on who you want to be, and then preparing for that.
Okay. So I would say once I settled on the different areas, and it is always kind of like, they can be a little bit in flux. right? Because as you
Sure.
learn, as you bring in new information, it might affect it, right? You might be refining it over time. But do I set aside time every day for that? No, not really. It's more like I'm living it every day. And then as I'm out there, then it's like, like I live in a place here in Colorado at 9,000 feet, and Nordic skiing, cross country skiing is really important to me. It's my favorite thing in the world to do. And so I think it was 2 years ago, it's coming up on 3 years, we moved to where we are now because we're 2 minutes from the nearest Nordic center. So like this afternoon, I'll go out and I'll ski. So it's a part of my life, I guess is what I'm saying.
Okay, sure.
You know what I mean? It just becomes a part of my life. And every day I'm usually engaged in those activities, something in those activities.
Well, and that's the key to moving forward, whether it's exercise, doing your creative favorite thing, whether it's being on a diet. Okay. It shouldn't really be a diet. It should be part of the way of life.
Yeah.
And, I think sometimes we get so restricted to it that we say, well, part of it is I want to be healthier, stronger, and you come up with all these things I have to do. I have to eat better. I have to exercise. But then you make it into a job. And when you make it into a job and not your life, it becomes, number one, becomes tedious. And most of us, I believe, fail if we haven't incorporated it.
Right. And why is it important? Like, that's a great point. This was about, I don't know how many years ago, I was sitting on a plane and I was talking to the woman next to me. And at the time she was around, I think she was around 70. And she was really fit. So I was like, oh, what's she doing? Maybe I can learn something new. Well, we got to talking and she was out, biking and skiing and all this kind of stuff. And I asked her, I was kind of thinking, oh, she's probably always been this way. And I asked her some questions. She laughed and she's like, no, it wasn't until I was in my mid 50s and she became a grandmother. And she goes, up until that point, I was kind of like, I spent a lot of time on the couch. And I said, well, what changed when you became a grandmother? And she said, I realized I wanted to be that type of grandmother who could really go out and do things with her grandkids. And she said, that's when I started putting effort into it. So at that point, it wasn't really effort. It wasn't a job, because she knew why it was important to her. When we know why it is important to us, the effort becomes kind of a joy. It becomes something we want to do. And I think that it's an important distinction. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. If we're just doing it because I want to lose 20 pounds for my class reunion or whatever, that can feel like a chore. But if it's like, how does this fit with the bigger vision and what's important to me for my life? It changes the way we feel about it, and it changes the outcome.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your podcast so our listeners can find yours.
Perfect. Thank you for asking.
Sure.
It's called Unyielded, Thriving No Matter What. And I actually have two different segments. The Wednesday segment is where I do interviews. They're under an hour, usually 45 minutes or so. And it's just different people who have found ways to thrive. And some of them have, like I had someone on who was a multiple gunshot survivor. And it was her story of what did it take for her to recover from that, not just physically, but emotionally. And then how did that help her grow? And I've had people who have TEDx talks on there. So it's a wide range of people. And I love that because I think we learn so much from other people and from their stories. Absolutely. So that's the Wednesday edition. It's huge. It's how we learned for centuries, right?
Right.
And then the Monday edition, those are called Rise and Thrives. And those are 10 minutes or less, where I just tackle one topic and it's meant to help people really master themselves and their lives. So those are the two. And it's anywhere you listen to podcasts.
And, many of us who are doing podcasts, we are bringing on guests to share their journeys. Mm-hmm. And I knew that Avoid the Maze was not special in that way. But what I knew when we started it was it's just one more avenue for others to hear that, you know what, I've been down that road.
Yeah.
And nobody gave me any guidance how to maneuver. What I had found interesting was, I've been in therapy in and out my whole adult life. And I kept waiting for the therapist to tell me I was okay. And the therapist never told me I was okay. They would always ask, are you okay? And I'd look at them and go, what does that even mean? But when I started working with coaches like yourself, that's when I realized it's not up to you to tell me I'm okay.
No.
It's up to you to sort of show me different pitfalls, things that happen, learning the word intentional and what it really, really means. Because until I became more intentional in certain aspects of my life, I was just walking on landmines.
Yep.
And landmines can really hurt.
Yeah.
But I also didn't understand that getting hurt isn't such a bad thing if you teach yourself how to recover from it.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Because there's a lesson in there.
So if there's one particular client maybe that you really helped, can you identify maybe how you guided them? Is there anyone in particular you can think of? Well, obviously without giving a name.
Yeah. Well, and when you say like how I guided them, like, tell me more what you mean by that question. So I answer this right.
As coaching them, okay,
yeah.
What it took to get them to take the steps that they wanted to take through the coaching.
Yeah. It begins with kind of what we talked about earlier, tapping into that. What's my vision for myself? I mean, the work starts there. And some people know that very quickly, others don't. But when we get clear on that, it's amazing what else starts to happen, right? So clarity on that is critical. The second thing, I think that I'm kind of thinking of a few clients kind of together here.
Sure.
Is once we get clear on that, it's okay, well, how do I make that happen? Because we fall into the trap of thinking there's not a way forward. And there is always a way forward. We just have to find it. And we find that together. And the combination of those two things, once people see this is what I want, and then they're like, wow, there is a way forward. It's going to probably require some change, whatever. Then they start tackling this stuff. But the clarity on those two pieces and the belief that they can do it, it's amazing what happens next. So the work is really there. Once you get that, then it becomes fun in a way, because you're exploring, you're being curious, you're adapting, and you're seeing progress. And once we start seeing progress, then we become so intrinsically motivated that we keep going.
Well, motivation is really necessary. And especially over the last 2 years when, I don't know what it's like in Colorado right now, but I know the state of Ohio is highly infected. And so many things that were open, even though they are open, many of us are just not going to, because it's like, hey, I've been okay so far. I don't want to expose myself. And a lot of us a year ago today, we thought, hey, you know what? We're at the end of this. It's a whole new world out there. And yet this morning, I heard on the radio that there now is a new strain of this virus that they found in Israel. And the reality of it is, it's going to keep mutating. And the more we do to take care of ourselves, to move forward, to find that positive approach, we'll be able to get through it. And, I'm not going to sit here and wait for things to happen. I'm going to help make things happen.
Yeah. It's a big difference in the mindset.
Absolutely. So how can our listeners find you?
Two of the best ways would be through my website, which is just bobbikaler.com. And then also, like I mentioned on LinkedIn, I'm there, and it's just Bobbi Kaler. and I post several times a week. And it's a great way just to also just kind of see if you're interested in this kind of content. You know, like I say, I post there a lot just as a way to help.
Well, we appreciate your time today. It's been wonderful meeting you. And I hope our listeners will reach out to you because I will tell you, coaching is a world of its own. And once you get involved in it, I can't tell you how it has changed me. I'll start getting this negative thought and I'll stop and I'll say, wait a second, why am I going down that road?
That's right.
And it's incredible what I have learned in the last couple of years, and now inviting you on, learning even more. So thank you for joining us, and we'll be in touch. Have a great day. Bye-bye now.